Hi everyone. So today I'm going to be talking to you about learning to set boundaries and learning to say no, which is a really crucial skill and one of the most important things that we can learn how to do to, I guess, protect our well-being and build our self-respect. So the reasons why boundaries matter so much is because learning to say no and learning how to set limits really prevents us from things like burnout, overwhelm, and being taken advantage of. So perhaps there's been a time, certainly that's been true for me throughout my life, on occasions when you've said yes to something or someone when you really said no. When that happens, it can lead to feeling really frustrated with yourself, that you weren't able to kind of speak up to say no when you really didn't want to agree to something. With that might come some shame about not being able to speak up and not say your piece, or feel like you can kind of protect yourself in that way. And it can also lead to feelings of resentment, you know, when you've said something, when you've agreed to something, when actually you really didn't want to do it. When you then go to do it, or afterwards perhaps you might start to feel quite resentful towards the person for putting you into that position. So we can really avoid all of those things by learning how to hone in on that skill of setting a boundary and putting in those limits. I think when we do say yes, when we mean no, a lot of the time it comes from a place of generally wanting to help, but perhaps we take it one step too far, where we start to put other people's needs in front of our own. Perhaps this is out of fear, out of worry, the fear of judgment, perhaps the fear that if we say no to something, that is going to lead to conflict, or maybe that it's going to lead to some kind of rejection or disconnection. And for a lot of people, saying no and putting in boundaries feels unkind. You know, it's not something that comes naturally to a lot of us. So certainly learning how to put in those limits is a good skill. It is definitely a good skill to learn. So the way in which we can use resource tapping to help us with learning how to put in those boundaries and learning how to say no is really as simple as taking yourself back to a time, to a memory or an incident where you remember what it feels like to set a boundary. You know, and this doesn't have to be a recent example, and it doesn't really matter who or what the situation was. Perhaps it was with a colleague, a friend, it could have maybe been with your partner, could have been in a work or a social setting. So just take some time to see if you can remember a moment where you said no, or where you set a limit. And if it helps, and sometimes it does, maybe write it down, or if you have a handful of examples, write those down, put them down on paper. And then once you have something in mind, see if you can really fill in the sensory details around that. So what was happening? What was happening at that time when you were setting a boundary? Who was there? Who was with you? Who was the individual or individuals that you said no to? How did you feel? Notice your sense and your emotional state, and perhaps any feelings in your body when you were saying or putting in that boundary. And then the moment that you get a good sense of it, and again, you can take your time with it, this doesn't have to be something that you rush. The moment that you get a sense, that felt sense of what it felt like, that empowerment to say no and put in that boundary, you begin the tapping to anchor this into your body and to really strengthen that feeling. And keep tapping as long as it feels comfortable, and as long as the feeling is positive. Now, if there's more memories of setting boundaries that come in, then you can tap those in as well. You can either just go from one memory to another, or you could perhaps stop and go through the process again, sort of think about, what was it that I was doing? Who was I with? What were the circumstances? What was I saying? How was I standing? How was my body feeling? And then the moment that you get that really good felt sense of it, you begin to tap. Yeah. Now, if you don't have a memory of setting a boundary, or this is something that's completely new to you, then perhaps you can think of someone who you know who is really good at setting boundary. Is there anyone in your past or in your present who you think, wow, this person really knows how to say no? You know, this person is really protective of their boundaries. Then you can bring that person to mind. If somebody in real life doesn't come to mind, then again you can use examples from fiction, maybe a character that you've seen on TV. It could be somebody from a book. It could be just anybody or anything when you come to mind. When it comes to mind, you're like, wow, this person really knows how to say no. They're really, really protective over their boundaries, and they know how to set a limit. And once you've got that image in mind, again, fill it out with the sensory detail as much as possible. So when you're thinking of this person, what do you notice about them in particular? Yeah, what is it that they're doing? What's their posture and body language like? How are they holding themselves? How do they speak when they set a boundary? Yeah. What's their tone of voice like? How do they say it? How do they say no? How do they set that limit? And also, how do you feel watching them? Yeah, how do you feel when you imagine them putting in that boundary? And again, the moment that you feel that you've got a good sense of this and you filled out that sensory detail, you begin to tap. Left, right, left, right. And keep tapping as long as the image remains positive. If at any point the image becomes negative or your brain goes off somewhere unpleasant, then stop tapping and see if you can pick out a positive example, either from yourself setting a boundary or of somebody else. However, if any negative images continue to creep in, then see if you can imagine putting that image or the words or whatever it is that's coming into your awareness into a container. And a container could be a locked box, a glass box, it could be a treasure chest, it could be a vault, just whatever you feel is strong enough to kind of contain that image, and then go back to the practice again and start from the beginning. So another way in which you can use resource tapping to help you set boundaries and kind of learn how to say no is to practice in advance of a situation. Say you're going into something and you're worried about standing your ground or getting your point across or saying whatever it is that you need to say, and you're worried that perhaps you're going to end up saying yes. Maybe you're going to visit a family member who always makes demands of you, or you're going into a work meeting and you know that they're going to ask you to do something that you really don't want to do. Whatever the circumstance is, you can really just imagine yourself going into that scenario. Again, it's easier to do this with your eyes closed, and really picture yourself going through that situation and the moment that you need to say no or set a boundary. And to help you with this, you can just begin to visualize of, where are you? Yeah, where are you? Are you at work? Are you at home? Is there a social situation? Is this to do with your family? where exactly is this situation? Where exactly is this place where you have to say no? Who is there? Who is around you? Who is the person that you need to communicate this to? Or the individuals, or the situation in which you have to communicate this boundary? What are you saying? You know, what are the words that you're using? Sometimes it can be good to kind of rehearse what you're going to say. So, for example, I know this is really important to you, but this time I'm going to have to say no. Or, I'm really flattered that you asked me, but that doesn't work for me right now. Or, thank you for asking, but maybe ask me later. Whatever it is that's going to fit the context, it can be helpful to really plan ahead and think about what it is that you're going to say. And the final part is maybe sort of envisaging how your body is going to feel when you speak your truth, when you put that boundary in, you know, perhaps imagining things like feeling strong and courageous and powerful, and your voice coming across really clear and assertive. And again, you can write this down to make it easier before you kind of visualize it, but really play out that scenario in advance and allow yourself to kind of get really absorbed in the experience. And the moment you have that felt sense, you begin to tap. Yeah, you begin to tap, and you're really anchoring that experience, those images, those words of you setting a boundary, that feeling of assertiveness and courage. And you're really tapping that into your nervous system, really embedding that into your body. And the more you practice this, the stronger that felt sense will become. Yeah. And it's something that's, if you do have something coming up, then it's worth practicing this a few times in advance. You can also use lots of different resources on top of this. Say, in the moment that you need to say no or set a boundary, you need courage. Yeah, so you can tap in that feeling of courage, or an image of courage, whatever comes up for you. Say you might need confidence. Have a think about who it is that you know who is confident, or a time where you felt confident. You can tap that in as well. Perhaps you need a protector. You need somebody there by your side for you to feel empowered enough to say no and to set those limits. Again, you can use the protector resource to help you along with that, and imagine them alongside you, you know, either to the side or standing in front of you whilst you're communicating your boundary and setting that limit. So I think that's it really. I just want to say that, you know, it is learning how to say no and being assertive and putting in that boundary is not something that comes easy for a lot of people. And it's okay if you struggle with this to begin with. It just takes a little bit of practice. Really looking after our boundaries and saying no is a form of self-care. You know, it's the way that we protect ourselves, we protect our energy, we protect our time, and we protect our needs and our values. And although to begin with it might feel a little bit tricky or a little bit difficult, the more you practice it, the easier it becomes, and then it starts to become a bit of a just very natural way of communicating. So let me know if you have any questions about that, and yeah, go forth and learn to say no and protect those boundaries.